Hey, what's up? I'm Guy.
I'm John.
It's our YouTube channel. Subscribe to this channel and give this video a like.
We also have a podcast below in the description. Go check that out as well.
We are sponsored by Tito's Handmade Vodka.
Yes, we are number one vodka in America. If you're watching this before Monday Night Football, pour yourself a cocktail.
John Clay Helton has been fired as the head football coach at USC. They announced on Monday. Clay Helton, who has been on the hot seat, I'd say probably for at least 4 years, has been fired as the head football coach at USC. On Sunday, we talked about, would Chris Peterson be a fit as the head coach at USC? Again, I think his job status has been a discussion for several years. I mean, I know it has. And now the job is open.
I just saw an interesting tweet from Mike Lombardi, who was a general manager in the NFL. And he said that the USC job is better than 2/3 of the NFL jobs because you're the owner, the general manager, and the head coach. And you and I have kind of had this discussion for years, right? Like, how do you balance a high level, any NFL job, like not talking the Steelers or the Aaron Rodgers Packers, but just the Jacksonville Jags, right? With Trevor Lawrence. Is that a better job right now? And ironically, they have a coach that was in the mix for the USC job. It felt like for a couple years when Clay Helton was still the head coach and who had been rumored in the Texas mix, right? And it felt like last year, unsubstantiated, that he almost turned down Texas and that led them to Sark and he ended up going to Jacksonville. But is Trevor Lawrence and the Jags, who are clearly terrible, like they are several years away from even competing for the playoffs, a better job than being the head coach at USC right now?
I'm not sure. I think USC can be a better job. I do think NFL jobs are generally, you as a, depending on your owner, you can really control a lot. I think where I would disagree with Mike Lombardi, he said, what did I just show? 2/3?
2/3, yeah. That's
Yeah,
pretty high. That's high.
That's too high. I think Mike's wrong about that.
I
Could you
agree.
convince me that SC could be a better job than Jacksonville? Yes. Also partly dependent on what you want as a coach, because being a college coach and an NFL coach are two different things. I've talked to Petros Papadakis about this over the years many times. And one of the things he's always told me is there's a ton of bureaucracy at USC. The board of directors is 50 plus people. That one of the problems they had with Pete Carroll was, guess what Pete Carroll did? He won so much that nobody could tell him what to do. Pete Carroll was in charge. And so the entity didn't like that. And so since then, you've had coaches who did not have a lot of leverage become the head coaches of USC, right? Guys who would go, yeah, whatever. Lane Kiffin was not in a position to say no. Sark certainly was not in a position to say no. Eddie O did not get the job, but wanted the job very badly. And Clay Helton had been on the staff. He was not in a position to make any demands. So that's why I say it can be a better job. But the question is, at the end of the day, would they really let Urban Meyer come be Urban Meyer? Would they really let Pete Carroll walk through that door, Pete Carroll 2.0, walk through that door again? Clay Helton is not the first coach to fail at USC or not to live up to their standards. In fact, in recent years, more of them have not lived up to standards than have been Pete Carroll. And they've been Pete Carroll and everybody else for a long time now. So I think I don't think you can get can a college job be better than 2/3? I mean, the Oklahoma job is better right now for the coach they have than it is for him to leave for most NFL jobs. That I agree with, right?
Yeah, like Ohio State, being the head coach for Ryan Day at Ohio State is better than the Lions job, is better than the Minnesota Vikings
might be better
job.
than 2/3. Like, he might say no to more than 2/3. He might only say yes to like 5 NFL jobs, Ryan Day.
Yeah, because Ohio State currently, as we're recording this, September 13th, 2021, is an infinitely better job than USC. And I think, listen, I have a soft spot because we are West Coast guys. We lived through it. I know through some of your travels professionally, you went through practices there, experienced that. You were a Fresno State guy. I was too, but I came later. One of the biggest moments, I'd say in the mid-2000s, was Fresno State playing them. They were kind of the bar. Pete Carroll, we all knew someone. What do they play? 6 Degrees of Kevin Bacon. If you grew up on the West Coast, you could play like 2 degrees of a connection to that program for like that 10-year run of just something cool happening. And it was awesome. But like you said, it has not been remotely close to that for the last decade. And I think people kind of live on the past. And I think this happens with Texas because the way you said Petros, I just call him Petros, the last name's a little difficult to say, described has always been the knock on Texas. Like a lot of cooks in the kitchen make it very difficult. And it always feels like Ohio State has a clear hierarchy. It's like just the AD to him, and it's just boom, and you start rocking and rolling. I do think, though, they would be insane. And listen, I have my red flags up on Urban sometimes with some of the stuff that surrounds him. If Urban Meyer, someone were to reach out over the next several weeks and be like, he would be interested at the end of this season, I think Chris Peterson should be the guy. But if Urban Meyer is interested, I would take him number one. I don't know if he would be, but to me, he would be the number one, kind of like when Alabama went after Nick Saban, right? Look back several years ago, and I think USC is on the short list of people that can whip it out of their pants and go to people in the NFL and offer jobs and not feel like, oh, like, no, you want to come to, like the Alabama did that in Miami and it worked. You could go to Jacksonville because I do think one way Lombardi is correct, no human being in America beside the Cons would view USC and the Jacksonville Jags brand and coaching at that both places as the same. Now, you could say if Trevor Lawrence becomes a star, it can make the Jags a realistic place.
I think I would argue, you know what I would say, John, is any NFL location can become one of the best jobs. Not any college location can become one of the best jobs.
I'd argue Jacksonville is the one place that might be a challenge for that to become a good
That's
place.
fair. I mean, there's a few. You might be right. You might be right. But if the Jags, if somebody takes over there and wins 2 Super Bowls in 8 years, and I'm just saying in college, geography matters a lot more than in the NFL, right?
Yes.
NFL coaches don't leave for other NFL jobs on rare occasion, unless there's some other behind the scenes stuff. But they don't just jump when it's going well and the people want them where they are.
Well, I mean, isn't a good example Sean Payton all those years? Like, could the Niners get him? Could the Cowboys get him? Like, no, he's going to coach there for like 30 years.
Yeah, the only time it came up is when he and the organization were kind of battling, and there was a would they trade him thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, look, now Pete Thamel made this early list for USC: James Franklin, Matt Campbell, Bill O'Brien. Bill O'Brien's name I heard yesterday, actually, on Sunday, as a guy who, obviously is the OC at Alabama. What he did at Penn State was very impressive. Not known as a guy who just happy to give other people some of the power, though. So again, like, this is part of the deal. Urban, you're going to have to give somebody what they want. Fickle, PJ Fleck, Cristobal. Greg, I don't know why. To me, Cristobal would be crazy to take the SC job. Greg Schiano, Tony Elliott, who's the offensive coordinator at Clemson. Former coaches who could be sought. Also, Chris Peterson and Bob Stoops. That's Pete Thamel's tweet.
I know this. On that list, I think everyone makes fun of Bill O'Brien immediately. I think you and I and our podcasts and our shows have defended him. I would put him on a different level, having won in the pros and in college, than PJ Fleck. Mario's at Oregon. He's not leaving. Greg Schiano would not be an option. To me, the thing with Tony Elliott, Southern guy, like, to me, he feels like an SEC coach. Like, if I was him, like, I would just wait to go to the SEC. The thing I would wonder about the sought-after coaches would be, the former coaches. I think Bob Stoops doesn't really feel California, though I think he would maybe he would be interested. Though I thought when he quit, it was because of his dad died young. He didn't want the stress, and it feels like he's pretty happy in the life.
I don't know why.
I do think he would be an interesting candidate, James Franklin. I mean, he would be near the top of the list. But I would take Chris Peterson over them all.
He's a PA guy. By the way, John, before we go any further, let's tell the people about our DraftKings game, which is down in the description below. Go get in our DraftKings game right now. 200 spots for our football game this weekend. Use the code HAM when you sign up.
Yep. Download the app, promo code HAM. Also, check out we have a special deal this week. Wineaccess.com/HAM. Buy $150 worth of wine, you get $50 off. How about that deal, guys?
33%, John.
How do you beat that? 33%. Just say that. 33%. That's a big time deal.
Okay, so you mentioned Chris Peterson there. I'm with you. He'd be at the top. I think Chris is interesting because he's talked when Pat Hayden was the AD and Chris was at Boise State. They did talk. The word at the time was they both agreed it wasn't going to be a fit for them with Pete. Want to be a part of that. I think what that's code for when it comes to Peterson.
Is that when he ended up hiring Sark?
I'm not sure of that. I don't remember the timeline on that. It could have been.
Because then he hired Sark, and then obviously Pete went to went to Washington. So it was at the time when I think he was entertaining, talking to people. And it also could have
Yeah,
been
that
when
would have made sense because I do remember from what I've heard people at Washington, they were thrilled when SC hired Sark away so then they could hire Pete. I feel like he might have talked to them a couple years prior after Lane got fired.
Yeah, because he wasn't talking to them when he was at Washington. He was very content.
Well, that was the year
right?
Lane got. That was the Lane firing, actually.
Yeah.
So yeah, that would have lined up.
But my point is, he was never flirting with USC. Once he got to Washington, he never flirted with other people.
No,
right?
this was a Boise State thing.
Yeah.
So I think what it was code for was Chris Peterson understood the dynamics at USC. At Boise, they were all in on football. At UW, they gave him what he needed. That's not at SC. It wants to be great at football, but there's a lot of just shit that the coach has to deal with. The stuff I mentioned earlier. And I think from that standpoint, it's not Chris is like, this is not, am I set up for success here? The other side of that, it always comes up is like, is his personality, is the flash, does he flashy enough? It's like, that's a joke. If he's good enough to win football games, then he's good enough to be the star of your program. And the best coaches take whatever your program's identity is, they make it into theirs, especially if your program needs an identity. And you'd say USC has an identity crisis right now.
Yes.
Right. An identity crisis. And Chris Peterson's programs, there's never any question about what the identity of those programs are. The best coaches leave their fingerprint. So I do think Chris, if given the flexibility, could do it. The question is, are they willing to kind of give up the keys and let him have everything he wants? The fact that he's back on television to me says, I just want to be around ball a little bit more. Want to be around ball a little bit more.
Can you say the same thing with Bob Stoops? It feels like he's a little bored. I think he was in the XFL or the AAF. Right. Like he would not lose there. I don't know if he'd win as big, but he would not lose, right? He would make them relevant immediately.
The question is, I think the other question here is for the same things we talked about with Peterson. Will Matt Campbell consider you? Would James Franklin consider you? Like, are you viewed by those guys? Are you viewed by the head coach at Penn State? Like, you know what? That would be a spot. I could jump to there, and that would be better for me. Does Matt Campbell, who's been saying no to people for years, go, you know what? I've been holding and holding and holding. USC, that's the shot. Or does he go, no, you guys, I'm holding out for another college job or Ohio State or something?
Well, I think it's fair to say you can't go to the playoffs from Iowa State. I think it's very challenging. You just saw they kind of got worked by Iowa. It's a difficult. They got to go through Oklahoma, who they did get once last year, but he kind of got beat badly in the Big 12 championship. I do think you can make the playoff at Penn State. Right now, he just beat Wisconsin.
Yep.
What if he, like, to him, like, what if you can just consistently win there? He has had multiple 11-win seasons.
He could look at it.
The conference is harder.
Right. He could look at it that way. Now, we'll see what I see at Oregon, but he could absolutely look at it that way. He's in Ohio State's division, right?
Yeah. I'm pretty sure he makes a lot of money there.
Well, they're going to have to pay a lot of money.
Yeah. I mean, if they want some of these guys, you're talking $7 to $9 million. Yeah. I mean, you're talking huge money, which they have not been paying.
The question is, are they, since Pete Carroll, when it was like, they've gone Lane, they've gone Helton, they've gone Eddie O briefly. Well, not really, and Sark.
Yeah.
Now, I mean, Sark was a sitting head coach in the league when they hired him.
Not winning much, though, relative to that.
UW
program.
Was like, all these 7-win seasons.
Yeah. Recruited well.
So.
Fight on.